Welcome to Evernote 301, Organizing Your Data. In our previous two videos, Evernote 101 and Evernote 201, we toured the Evernote Mac client and reviewed how we can get information into our Evernote account. In this video, we're going to look at how we can organize our data inside of Evernote. Here's an outline of what we're going to cover. As you can see, this video has three main sections: why we should organize our data, the organizational tools within Evernote, and methodologies for organizing. So let's get started with point number one, why we should organize our data. The reason we organize data is to make it more useful or more actionable. There are three main ways Evernote helps us make our data more useful. It helps us evaluate, connect, and remember. Now, I won't be giving dictionary definitions of these terms or referring to library science for an academic perspective. These are simply my thoughts. Let's start off with evaluating our data. This has to do with being able to see what we need at one time. For example, a note that contains the sales figures for multiple years side by side, like this note about Acme Incorporated. Evernote also helps us connect our data. That means that we can contrast and compare notes about Picasso's work with notes about modern graffiti artists. And Evernote helps us remember our data. That means that when we need to recall information, we can. For example, what was the name of that state park we visited last year? Oh yeah, Salt Fork State Park. Now let's talk about the organizational tools that Evernote has built right in. Now, of course, the first organizational tool are the notes themselves. So all these notes in the filtered note list are ways that we can break up, collect, and segment the data that we have. They're the basic building blocks in Evernote. Next, we have notebooks. Notebooks are simply collections of notes. Notebooks are to notes what folders are to files on your operating system. They're simply buckets to hold notes. Now, there are a couple of different kinds of notes. There are online versus offline notes. There's personal versus business notes if you have a business account with Evernote. And there are private versus public notes. So a private note would be one that only you have access to. And a public or shared note would be one that you've shared with either a certain number of other individuals or it's entirely public. You can create an offline or an online notebook by going to the File menu, selecting New Notebook, and then choosing either a synchronized or a local notebook. Now, these operate very similarly to each other, but there are a few differences. For example, a local notebook won't be processed through Evernote's image recognition system, and so text within the image won't be searchable. A synchronized notebook does count towards the monthly upload allowance that you have, whereas a local notebook doesn't have any restrictions on the number of notes that you can put in it. This isn't a business account, so unfortunately I can't demonstrate the difference between a personal versus a business notebook. But in this view, it would look very similar, but the business notebooks would be colored charcoal instead of this brown or tan color. It's also very easy to tell the difference between private and shared notebooks. All these notebooks are private. If I was to go and share one of these notebooks, you'll notice that when I mouse over, I have this share icon. I can click that, and I can choose whether or not I want to share this with a specific list of other individuals, or if I want to create a public link that anybody in the world can access. The third organizational tool that Evernote has is what are called stacks. Let me demonstrate this. First, I'm going to go ahead and create a few new notebooks. Okay, now that I have three new notebooks, I'm going to group all of these into a stack. I'm going to rename this stack. And I'm going to put the journal and trips notebook inside of this stack, simply by dragging and dropping. And there we go. You can see that graphically it looks different. It has this white band, and you can see that there's a number of notebooks in this stack. And when I click it, it expands out and shows me the particular notebooks inside of the stack. So a notebook stack is really that simple. It's just a collection of notebooks. In the same way that you can put folders inside of other folders on your operating system, you can put notebooks into a stack. There are a few things to remember about notebook stacks. First, you can't put a note directly inside a stack. They first have to be in a notebook, and then that notebook can be put into a stack. And you can't share a stack as such. You can share all of the individual notebooks inside of the stack, but not the stack itself. This isn't a problem so much because you can still share. The problem is that it won't show up as a stack for the person you're sharing it with. It'll simply show up as individual notebooks. The last primary organizational tool that I want to show you inside of Evernote are note links. Let me demonstrate this functionality by using the artwork we were looking at earlier. So I'm going to create a new notebook for my art collection, and I'm going to place this notebook inside of my personal stack because this is a personal notebook. I'm going to go back to the inbox, select these two notes, and move them to that art collection notebook. Now, eventually this notebook will hopefully be full of some of my favorite pieces of art. And while that's the end goal, it presents its own difficulties. Namely, I don't necessarily want to have to scroll through a really long list of notes to be able to find what I'm looking for. And if I have multiple notes with artwork by the same artist, I might want to be able to jump from one to the other very easily without having to browse through, again, that long list. Note links give us this capability. I'm going to go ahead and create a new note in this notebook, and I'm going to call this my Art Collection Dashboard. In order to create note links, we have to first sync our account. In this Art Collection Dashboard note, I'm going to put links to my other two notes, the Graffiti and the Picasso note. So all I have to do is right or two-finger click on the Graffiti note and select Copy Note Link. Then I go back to my dashboard note, and I can paste that link in using Command V. It's just that easy. Let's grab the link for the Picasso note as well, and we'll drop that in here. Fantastic. Note links work very similar to URLs on the web. Every note can have a link, and I can place a link for one note inside of another one. And from my dashboard, I can click the link, and it'll jump me right to that Graffiti note. And that's whether or not the Graffiti note happens to be in the Art Collection notebook or in an entirely different part of my Evernote account. Let's finish up this section by talking about metadata. The best definition for metadata I've heard is that metadata is data about data. And the most important metadata inside of Evernote has got to be the tags. Tags are a great way to cross-organize information inside of Evernote. They're global values, and unlike notes, which can only be in a single notebook and notebook stack at a time, tags can be applied to any note regardless of the location. So I just applied two tags to this note. One tag is called art and one tag is called graffiti. And since this is also a note about art, I'm going to apply that tag as well. And I'm also going to apply the name of the artist, Pablo Picasso. Tags are really flexible, and you can use them for almost anything. A lot of Evernote users are also fans of David Allen's Getting Things Done methodology, and they use tags to map to what Mr. Allen calls contexts in GTD. But they can really be anything. So how you use tags is entirely up to you. The only situation where you might run into a conflict is if you use Evernote Business. Evernote Business does allow for tag management on the part of the account administrator, so you may find some additional restrictions here, but they'll be company specific and will only apply to the business tags. Since we're on the topic of tags, let's check out the tag section over here. There are a couple of do's and don'ts when it comes to tags. For example, when you're tagging a note, you'll want to use tags that are very specific. Pablo Picasso or graffiti. Those are really specific tags. You don't want to use something generic like archive or money or photo. Those are much too generic. You also don't want to use tags for words that are already in the note. This is just redundant. Now, there are exceptions to this rule, but in general, when you're tagging a note, tag it with information that isn't already in the note. You should also regularly clean up your tags. So for example, when I'm looking at my tag view here, I notice that the tag Phil Libin doesn't have any notes assigned to it. See that? 0. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that tag. Sorry, Phil. Another thing that you'll want to do is combine similar tags. So for example, we have idea and ideas. I like the plural of this better, so I'm going to double click on the idea tag. It'll take me to the note that has that tag, and I'll delete that and add the plural form. Now that I've got that fixed, I'm going to click the back button. Now that the idea tag is not assigned to any notes, I'm going to delete it as well. Another thing that we can do to help simplify our tag structure is to visually organize it in a kind of a hierarchy. For example, you can take any tag and nest it underneath any other tag. So let's take Pablo Picasso and nest it under the art tag. Let's do the same thing for the graffiti tag. And as you can see, we can collapse the art tag and expand it. We can also take any of these tags, let's say time management is a topic I'm always interested in, and we can drag it over to our shortcuts panel. Now we'll have access to that tag at all times, and if we click it, it'll automatically filter our notes to only show us the ones that are tagged with time management. Another thing you don't want to do is use tags that overlap with each other. For example, if you have a tag for the word web, the word internet, and the word online for notes with similar content, it's going to make it difficult to find the information you want later on. And I believe that personal development and success overlap a little bit. I prefer personal development, so I'm going to go to this note with success, and I'm going to delete it. And you can see it's already tagged with personal development, so this is doubly redundant. Excellent, we'll do that. We'll go back to the tags view, and now we can delete the success tag because it is no longer being used. And finally, tags like photo and image and audio are not needed because the Evernote search tool gives us the ability to specify whether or not we want to see notes that have photos or audio files attached to them. Let's wrap things up by talking about organizational methodologies. Because Evernote's organizational elements are so flexible, you can choose a structure that makes sense to you. That could be as well known and well documented as the Dewey Decimal System, or the secret weapon methodology, or as simple as a notebook structure based on the month your notes were created. It's all up to you. That being said, there are some general principles that will help almost regardless of the organizational method you choose. The first is the principle of intuition. You need to build your system the way that makes the most sense to you. If having lots of folders and just a few tags is how your brain works, that's the system you should use. And if having just a couple folders but lots of tags maps better to your experience, then that's the system you should use. Your system will serve you best when you design it to match your intuition. And the second principle is that of consistency. However you design your system to work, you want to be consistent. For example, if you clip articles to read later, it makes sense to store them in the same notebook. For example, a notebook called Read and Review, or to tag all of those notes with the same designation. For example, Read Later. To finally tie all this together, I want to tell you a little bit about my system for Evernote. It's very simple. I use notes to hold information about a single idea, project, or event. For example, a note about the anniversary vacation to Niagara Falls, or my goals for 2013. I use notebooks to organize information about a particular theme, let's say trips or personal development. Stacks I use for the main areas of responsibility in life: personal, relationships, church, and so on. I use links to tie together notes within a notebook and between stacks. For example, a table of contents for all my personal development notes, or a dashboard that links to all my favorite artwork. And finally, I use tags as a way to cross-organize my information between notebooks and stacks. For example, personal and business receipts are both tagged with receipts. Graphics for professional projects and my personal favorite works of art are both tagged with art. And personal and professional trips are both tagged with travel. In this screencast, we've talked about the ways we can organize information within Evernote using notes, notebooks, stacks, tags, and links. And we also discussed some principles for how we can organize our data using intuition and consistency. I hope you found this information to be helpful. Thanks for watching Evernote 301.